I just finished watching this mini-series on PBS, the American public television station, called The Roosevelts, An Intimate Story. And it's a remarkable report because I didn't know much about the Roosevelts. So this series profiles Teddy Roosevelt, his niece Eleanor, and then Teddy's fifth cousin Franklin. And I was very intrigued, particularly by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, because of his influence. Historians would consider his presidency, he was the only one who had 4 terms as president, as one of the top 3 greatest American presidencies. The first being George Washington, second is typically Abraham Lincoln, and the third would be FDR. Now FDR came from a very privileged family. He came from one of the oldest families in New York, very wealthy. Of course, having a cousin who's a president, Teddy, gave him a lot of opportunities and a trail that was already blazed for him. And so he was a U.S. Senator and also became the Assistant Secretary to the Navy. So very, very influential, even by the age of 39. He was well on his way to following Teddy Roosevelt and becoming president. But there was a slight twist to it. In August of 1921, 39 years old, 5 kids, and he was vacationing in New Brunswick, and what his family typically did over the summer. But after one night of being in the water and being in the sun, is that he grew feverish, and so he had to go up into his room. And so for the next 2 years, he was overcoming something called infantile paralysis, which is commonly known as polio. So eventually, FDR was paralyzed from the waist down. Now, him being a very ambitious young man, very vivacious, he must have gone through his mind 2 years trying to recover sensation in his extremities. Who's going to elect a crippled old man? Who wants to elect me? But I think even more profoundly is when one is deprived of the ability to move. Like, what goes on in someone's mind? And so for him, the amount of soul-searching, truly reliance upon other people, and having a taste of what people go through, so growing in empathy, really, I think, made a profound change in him. And his wife, Eleanor, said, his polio was a blessing in disguise. In this miniseries, there was a commentator named George Will who said, when FDR had to put on his steel leg braces, which enabled him to stand up, but walk very awkwardly, it was almost as if the steel braces were coming onto his very soul, because it made him grow in a great deal of empathy. And when one is able-bodied and rich and full of influence, well, who needs the help of others? But when one is somehow having to overcome adversity, one's perception changes, and one grows in a great deal of patience and empathy. And the American people did see beyond his disability as, in fact, an ability. So he became the governor of New York in, I think, 1928, and by 1932 he began the first of his 4 presidencies. And the experience with polio, I think, helped him immensely, guiding the United States through the Depression of the 30s, and then through World War II, so war in Europe and war in the Pacific. And so people often ask, FDR, why are you so cheerful, and why are you so calm about all the catastrophes going on in the world? Well, he said to someone, when you have to overcome fears and you face it head on, you grow in courage, strength, and confidence. And then say to yourself, I have overcome this horror, and I can overcome many more. So much so that you want to do the thing you think you cannot do. And FDR, because of going through his polio, was a blessing in disguise, both for the American people and for the whole world as a whole. I think for us too, adversities are God's blessings in disguise. Our first reading today was taken from the book of the prophet Isaiah. And if you notice a name you don't typically hear about, Cyrus. Well, who is Cyrus? We'll be kind of going back in terms of what Cyrus did for the Jewish people. Is the Jewish people have had to go through adversities time and time again for 4,000 years of constant adversity. Most of it is self-inflicted, as with us too, is we don't want to follow God, we don't want to love and serve our neighbors. And then God says, okay, if you don't want to follow me, you'll see what happens. And so by this point, the Israelites are enslaved in Babylon, about the 6th century. And they finally come to their senses and say, okay, Lord, sorry, we will obey you and we will love and serve our neighbors. And so they come, but even in the adversity became a blessing for the people because we have someone called Cyrus. Now, the Israelites were enslaved by Nebuchadnezzar, the emperor of the Babylonian Empire. Well, that empire fell by the Persians, and so the leader of the Persians is Cyrus. And Cyrus was considered a very benevolent dictator because he saw that in order to conquer people, the worst thing to do is to use force, but almost to use persuasion as a way to keep conquered nations loyal. One thing that he made a point of doing is allowing local conquered nations to keep their religions and even some of their social practices, because if they're happy, then the Persians don't have to go to war with all these warring little nations, but to keep them happy. And even Cyrus is considered the anointed. And that's a profound word, because that's where we get the word Christ, or Messiah. Those are Jewish terms indicating that someone is either priest, prophet, or king. And of course, someone has to be a Jew. And so for the prophet Isaiah to consider Cyrus anointed is really indicating that in the adversities that the Jewish people had to undergo, that God would send Cyrus. Even a couple of verses previous to what we've listened to today, that Isaiah considers Cyrus a shepherd. So God always works kind of his blessings in disguise. And even the experience of being in Babylon really helped the people and made them into one strong community. For one thing is that they really developed their Hebrew script while they were in Babylon. But more profoundly is that they were able to consolidate a lot of the teachings, the oral traditions that they had, and brought them into what we have as now the Old Testament. So it's almost like the Jewish people had to undergo their adversities in Babylon in order to give us the Old Testament. So adversities are God's blessings disguised. Now, none of us wants to experience adversities. I mean, we want pleasure, we don't want pain. I think pain can be a good thing, because the pain is always a reminder that something is wrong, and we have to address it. Now, often when it comes to pain, we want to medicate the symptoms versus trying to heal the underlying concern. And I think if we look at our own selves, if we're in pain, that means something's wrong. We can go to the doctor or try to alleviate that. But it's not only physical pain, emotional, or even societal pain we want to overcome. Now, again, adversity is sometimes God's blessings disguised. And I think adversity is part and parcel of the Christian life, which began for us in baptism. St. Paul refers to being baptism as we are plunged. If we've been baptized into Christ, we've been baptized into his death. But if we've been baptized into his death, we are baptized into his resurrection. And even Jesus says, unless you want to become my followers, you must deny yourselves, take up your cross daily, for St. Luke, and follow me. The cross is the ultimate instrument of adversity. And none of us as Christians are masochists. We don't find pleasure in pain. But we realize that sometimes the cross is the avenue in which God ultimately shows his blessings. And that's why we processed in today with the cross. We'll process out as a reminder that it is the cross, the tree of life, that is the ultimate blessing of God. And even Jesus, before he undergoes his passion, will say, it is the seed that dies to itself that bears great fruit. And even being here in the gym, for me, not having a proper church is a great adversity, because it would be nice to have a proper place of our own. But I think underlying, if we take a step back and reflect, think, boy, all the things we've been able to do because we've accepted the adversity, the challenge, and really grown in faith in God and trust in each other. And I think it's a good point for us. And so we have to continue to trust in the adversity of not having a proper a place of worship. Even more profound, many of us are undergoing our own pains and adversities, whether it's physical, emotional, social, emotional. And I think ultimately we have to put our trust in God, that these are adversities that are disguised as God's blessings. But we can never do it alone. FDR could never have overcome his polio and become one of the greatest presidents if he didn't have the support of others. And so we have the support, of course, of God's word to encourage us in our adversities. He gives us His Word and His body and blood to nourish us on this journey of taking up our cross and following Him. And also the example of the church. All of us are gathered here to support one another. Some of us are healthy, some of us are not so healthy. Some of us are strong and some of us are weakened. Well, we have to support each other because we cannot do it alone. And if we're together, we can overcome the adversities and really see them as God's blessings. So the greatest blessing that Franklin Delano Roosevelt experienced was his polio. In kind of the awkwardness that is, but it really helped him kind of learn about himself, do that soul search. He couldn't run away from the problem, he had to address it. But I think more importantly, he grew in empathy. And it helped him so much as the American people were suffering so much under the Depression and the whole world in World War II. So let us see our adversities as God's blessings in disguise. And if we can't see God's blessings in our adversities, let's all the more turn to Him and His Word and His body, blood, and then say yes. And not only find the blessings in disguise, but help others see their adversities as God's blessings this week.